What is the scariest story you know that is 100% true? Back in the 90s, my mom was on the highway heading home from a friend's house late at night. She was driving a really nice Thunderbird. After a while, this big white van drove next to her, and the driver started performing some very rude gestures and being young and dumb. My mom reciprocated the gestures. Then the dude pulled up a big Bowie knife to the window. My mom started panicking and sped up to get away, and the van was following right along. Then the guy tried to run her off the road. Keep in mind they're probably going about 100 miles per hour. She gets on the exit to get home, and he's still following her. When she does get back to her house, which she shared with my grandparents, she pulled into the driveway honking the horn and screaming, trying to wake someone up. The van pulls into the driveway just as my grandfather comes out in his underwear with a gun. The dude got scared and drove off. My mom wouldn't leave her house for a month except for school, but never at night. An acquaintance of mine sent his son to a triathlon camp in Lubbock, TX. A week later, his son came back from camp. The next day, the son was complaining of a headache. 4 days later, he was dead. Healthy, happy, fit 14-year-old 1 week, dead the next. Turns out the lake had Naegleria fouled, the brain-eating amoeba. Nothing scares me as irrationally as already being dead and waiting for your body to catch on. 3 sailors survived the sinking of the U.S. West Virginia at Pearl Harbor, only to die 16 days later due to the lack of air. The Navy knew they were there, but couldn't get to them. I don't know which is worse, surviving for 16 days waiting to be rescued or being on watch listening to your friends trapped inside knowing that you can't help them. Horrific for both, but damn. On September 20th, 1987 in Bellingham, Washington, a Georgia Pacific paper mill worker was sent to inspect a heat exchanger system in a steam plant. Inside the base of the stack, he spotted a charred skeleton. To this day, no one is certain who the victim was, how they wound up in such a horrible place, nor why. You know she is real serious if the sentence starts with a complete date. Do you know that I give you money for uploading my videos to TikTok, and the one who gains the most views in a month gets an extra $1,000? More details on my Discord server, link in the comments. That Netflix documentary about the pizza guy in Erie, Pennsylvania, who had a bomb collar put around his neck then was forced to rob a bank. As a former delivery driver, I was scared just the entire time, but also super intrigued by the investigation and the people involved. I think the title you're looking for is Evil Genius. The Lake Neos Disaster. The lake periodically belches a cloud of invisible carbon dioxide gas that suffocates everything within a 16-mile radius. In 1986, over 1,700 people and all their livestock died without even understanding what was happening to them. One of my friends had someone following her home, hiding in the bushes so they couldn't be seen. She booked it to her house, got inside, and he was watching the house from the outside. She called the cops. They come along quietly and got the jump on him. He had condoms, handcuffs, and a knife. When they got his DNA, it turned out that he was linked to a half-dozen assaults in the area. She credits her regimen of running sprints to outrunning him that night and firmly believes she would have been attacked if she couldn't outrun him then. Rule 1. Cardio. I am 20-year-old male and live a very eventfully unlucky life. This is one of the many scary events that happened in my lifetime. I attend a uni outside my city, and therefore I rent a student accommodation throughout the year. The contract for my accommodation ends before my last exam, which would be on the following week. I thought to myself I could go to the uni library, usually 24/7, the night before and spend an all-nighter. Irresponsible, but last-minute revision is my savior. I get to the library at around midnight. I see that it is closed for emergency maintenance. I'm unsure of what happened, but at this point my plan is screwed, and I'm thinking the best thing to do is to book a hotel and just study there. All the hotels around seem to way too pricey, and I notice there's a hotel that's pretty cheap for the night. I walk for about 30 minutes on this long, dark, silent road. At this point I'm scared and notice a light at the end of the street being my hotel. I think to myself, finally, at least I'll be safer in there. Spoilers, I was not. I go into this old Victorian-like building and notice no one is at the reception. I ring the bell a couple of times until I see a tall, strange-looking man staring at me from the top of the stairs. I ask if he works there. He tells me he doesn't and is just another customer. He then proceeds to ask me a lot of personal questions. I answer truthfully, but in a very vague manner. He then proceeds back up the stairs where I hear loud bangs followed by shouting. The reception staff then comes back to the reception and I end up booking the room. As I go upstairs, I hear knocking on the door next to mine followed by some shouting. I hear a few more knocks, then I get a knock on my door. I open the door to see the strange man from before. He asks me if I'm alone. I tell him that I have a friend coming over in 5 minutes. I did not. He then asks if he could come in and I refuse. This then prompts him to try to force his way into the room, which I resist and close the door on him. There were about 10 minutes of peace before more knocking on my door. At this point, I'm watching a YouTube video on my phone with a bit of talking and not much background noise. Straight after the knock, I hear footsteps going to another room knocking. I assume the man thought that the voice from the YouTube video was my visiting friend, making him hesitate and target the door next to mine. There were seconds of silence followed by large banging and the walls shaking. I was about to save myself at this point. I hear screaming and shouting. I later find out that the weirdo was a serial killer who was hiding knives and machetes, intending to kill someone that night. He broke down the door of the person next door and tried to kill the person staying there. The police came shortly after and took down statements and information. To my knowledge, the individual ran away. I do not know whether he got caught. He was in fact a prime suspect for a previous murder, and since then I have never gone for a cheaper hotel, no matter the alternative distance or price. Tough to pick just one because there is true evil and humanity out there. Stuff like the Blood Eagle ritual is pretty awful. But in terms of really scary, probably stuff that just kind of happens on accident. Like the story of Kyle Plush, just awful. He was in a minivan that has one of those back seats that you can push backward to lay flat in the trunk for extra storage space. He went to grab something in the trunk, leaning over the seat, and it tipped backward and pinned him upside down against the back of the car in a position such that he couldn't get himself out. He called the police twice, the second time he called and gave them a very clear description of the car. Plush called 911 again at around 3:35 p.m. Police said this time he provided a description of the vehicle as he desperately pleaded for help but couldn't hear the dispatcher. Isaac said the information didn't get relayed to officers at the scene. This is not a joke. The teen said over 911, "I'm almost dead." He asked the dispatcher to tell my mom I love her if I die. Just a horrible random accident that could have happened to anybody. This kid didn't go looking for trouble, like he didn't try and go down a chimney or go caving like other people who have gotten stuck and suffocated. He was just reaching for something in his trunk, got pinned, and then was not found in time. Nightmarish for the kid and his family. My wife arrived at her parents' house that she was currently living in due to health issues of her father's. She got into the house, no one else was there at the time, and instead of going further in, stopped in the first room that held the computers, which was right by the door. She went into the room and was messing around on the internet when one of the cats came into the room. Her cat, to be precise. Well, this cat was super laid back, loved everyone and never picked fights or got aggressive. He would literally lay down and let squirrels throw pecans at him from trees and do nothing but take it. Not tonight, however. Tonight he was growling and hissing intermittently while standing between my wife and the entrance to the rest of the house. A laid-back, sweet old cat was acting like he was going to rip out a throat. Well, my wife decided that this was really f***ing weird, so she picked up her cat and left the house. Lo and behold, she sees a cop car patrolling down her street and flagged them down. She explained the situation and they demanded that she stay in their cruiser while they both checked it out. Turns out they found the back door wide open, super bad. Her parents and her never leave the door unlocked, much less open. She came to find out later from those cops that they were hunting down a serial rapist that had been spotted in the area, and that was why they were rolling down a safe, normally residential street. Super spooky. Life pro tip: always trust the cat. There was a serial killer known as the Weepy Voice Kigler. He would kill people, then call 911 from a payphone, crying and begging them to catch and stop him. You can find the recordings of his 911 calls on YouTube. Yeah, going on my list of things I will never search for on the internet. Every year, thousands of children go missing all over the world, and at most you hear about a few per year in your area. No one seems to care. It is literally a nuisance to many to have "Have you seen my child?" ad pop up on their social media. There was an article I saw recently, in Canada I think, where there was huge petition to start finding people. Their offense? 911, or whatever they are called there, were receiving a large amount of calls from people angry that their phone was going off at like 2 in the morning for an Amber Alert. I cannot wrap my mind around calling 911, pitting an emergency dispatcher to complain about a sound. And on top of that, it ties them up from other calls, which is the reason for the fine. One night about 2 years ago, I believe it was spring, and it was about 9 or 10 at night. A bit of context: my mother is a photographer, and she has one of those big expensive cameras. Now I was just sitting in my room playing Xbox with my buddies, and I heard the commotion of my family in the doorway to the backyard, the kind of commotion of people gawking, so I went out to see what it was all about. I go to my dad and ask what it is, and he says there's something in our backyard, and my mom is out there trying to get pictures, but her flash isn't working, and she's right at the fence trying to get pictures, and all of a sudden the flash goes up and lights up the pitch black yard, and right in front of my mom is a bear stood up on its back legs just standing there. By the time the flash was done, my mom was nearly in the house. Happened to me, have posted about it before. I was around 11 years old and I woke up in the middle of the night to a man straddled on top of me with his hand over my mouth and nose. He told me to roll over and not scream. I rolled onto the floor and tried to scream. I say tried cause when you are truly terrified it can take a second to find your voice. My mom heard me screaming and came in and fought with the guy. He was at least 6, she was 5'3", and scared him enough with the fighting and screaming that he took off out the window he had come in through. Never did catch him. If you haven't watched my other videos, then be sure to watch this one. I bet it will amaze you. Or you can watch all our videos in a row in this playlist. Write your stories in the comments, subscribe, turn on the bell, and go to our Discord. There we give you money for uploading our videos to TikTok. You uploaded, you gained views, you got money. Link in the comments.